Hello and welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones, and we're so glad to have you here. Today, we're coming to you from the State House in Trenton, where both the Senate and Assembly, both houses are in session. So there's a lot of activity going on outside as well as inside the State House, and we've got all the highlights.
We live in a first world, not in a third world. Send them back, right? Send them back! Send them back!
A vocal crowd outside the State House made their voices heard. New Jersey Assemblyman Paul Kenitra, who represents the 10th Legislative District, led this rally outside the State House opposing a trio of immigration bills moving through the legislature. Dozens gathered, voicing strong concerns about the package of bills, which have now passed both chambers and are headed to the governor's desk.
Now let me tell you what we're up against today and why you're here. There's three insane bills that are about to get rammed through the legislature. Every single one of them is more crazy than the next. The first bill illegally tries to take any masks off of federal law enforcement, even considering that Democrat protesters are actively doxing agents, posting their home addresses online, and trying to ruin theirs and their families' lives. Another bill not only bans the sharing of any kind of important data with the feds, it also lets illegals know if the federal government is investigating them using license plate data. And the third's like the granddaddy of them all. It codifies our sanctuary status for the 900,000 foreign invaders here illegally. It prevents law enforcement at the local, the county, and the state levels from working with ICE at all, and it makes our communities less safe as a result. This state government behind me has a $4 billion budget deficit because of overspending. And rather than cut any of the $7 billion they're giving to illegals in benefits, they decided to axe the Stay NJ program that helps our seniors. They do not care about you.
Who isn't proud of their ancestry? This is not about discrimination. It's about simple right and wrong. And who can afford it? Not taxpayers, not the middle class that keeps getting squeezed by the Democrats with high taxes that pay for programs that the middle class doesn't qualify for. The reality is we are a wealthy nation, but the nation is $38 trillion in debt. We simply cannot afford this. There's a process that people should follow to gain entry legally, pay taxes, and become good citizens. With ongoing budget pressures, it's reasonable to ask whether expanding taxpayer-funded benefits in this area is sustainable while other programs face cuts. The core issue here is ensuring families fairness, upholding the rule of law, and prioritizing resources for citizens and legal residents.
We have to thank the men and women of ICE for the job they do to protect us every day. And let me just share one personal thought of this. A number of years ago, my oldest daughter was working in Israel, and she went from one side of Jerusalem to the other to meet a friend for dinner on a bus. They stopped at the marketplace, and it was crowded, and she sat down and moved over to the seat by the window as the bus filled up. She reached down to put her phone away as a suicide bomber set the bomb off, killing 17 people, blowing up the bus, catching on fire, and injuring hundreds of other people. The suicide bomber was from Hamas. His family was proud. He was 19 years old and killed 17 people. Men, women, children, going home after a long day. ICE protects us from these people that have come into this country.
Before the debate began, there was a very different tone inside the State House, one marked by celebration, culture, and community. Lawmakers marked Greek Independence Day with a ceremonial resolution recognizing the contributions of Greek Americans across New Jersey. Clergy from the Greek Orthodox Church were in attendance, including His Eminence, Metropolitan Apostolus of New Jersey, the spiritual leader of the Greek Orthodox Metropolis of New Jersey. I had the chance to speak with him about the significance of the day and the strength of the Greek community here in the Garden State.
We've been very honored the second year to be able to come to the State House of New Jersey in order to celebrate a milestone for Greece, which being almost over 200 years of freedom. So today we celebrate the initiative for 200 years ago when the people were so difficult to provide the unity, the freedom to live in a very wonderful country without anyone to control you. So today we celebrate freedom, justice, and peace.
The Assembly floor continued with recognitions reflecting New Jersey's diversity. Another resolution welcomed the 2026 State Grand Marshals of St. Patrick's Day parades from across New Jersey, celebrating Irish American Heritage Month. Lawmakers also commemorated the 100th anniversary of Black History Month with a special resolution and a choral performance. After the day's recognitions wrapped, it was back to business in the chamber. As voting began, lawmakers launched into a spirited and at times heated debate over a 3-bill immigration package. The legislation passed along party lines and is now heading to Governor Mikey Sherrill's desk. It's aimed at limiting how immigration enforcement is carried out in New Jersey. One bill would prohibit law enforcement officers, including federal agents, from wearing face coverings while interacting with the public, with certain exceptions. Another would restrict government agencies and healthcare facilities from collecting information about a person's immigration or citizenship status. And a third would codify the state's Immigrant Trust Directive, limiting cooperation between local police and federal immigration authorities.
Public institutions are warned that sharing information with law enforcement carries a legal risk. When that happens, information stops moving. Investigators lose access to records, prosecutors lose the ability to verify identities, and agencies lose the ability to know who is actually in their systems. This bill restricts access to core identifying information, including motor vehicle records, taxpayer data that are routinely used to verify identity, detect fraud, and support investigations. It puts agencies and healthcare providers in a position where even appropriate information sharing carries risk. And when there's a risk, people hesitate. That hesitation has consequences. It slows down investigations, it weakens coordination between agencies, and it makes it harder to ensure that systems we rely on are functioning accurately with verifiable information. Now, Governor Phil Murphy declined to sign a prior version of this bill, warning that the bill as written could be construed to conflict with federal law and could jeopardize billions of dollars in federal funding for critical programs, as he said. That concern goes directly to the structure of what is in front of us today. The bill still broadly restricts how information is collected and shared, still creates legal exposure that discourages agencies from doing what they're supposed to do. The end result is the same. Information stops moving. When it stops moving, all the systems meant to protect us no longer work. Hard no to this regurgitated, lazy bill.
Let me explain about what it does not do. This bill retains carve-outs. It's not, as my distinguished colleague over there said, this is not Governor Murphy's bill. It's different, materially different. It does not eliminate cooperation with federal immigration authorities in all circumstances. Individuals subject to a final order of removal are not fully shielded. People who have been arrested but not convicted, just arrested, of any crimes that have fewer protections. And I understand why those provisions exist. They are legal constraints and there are political realities in this chamber. But I want the community to hear me say clearly, those carve-outs are not invisible and they are not without consequence. Immigrants who have final orders, many of whom have lived here for decades, who have U.S. citizen children, who are waiting for appeals, are not protected by this legislation, are not treated with equal rights under the law, and are exposed in ways this bill does not fully address. So when advocates like those at the New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice and the American Civil Liberties Union call on us to do more, to provide vulnerable immigrant communities with equal rights under the law, that they are entitled to. I hear with them and I stand with them.
This bill will take New Jersey a giant step backwards when it comes to ensuring the safety and protection of our citizens. We learned a very hard lesson on 9/11 when the Commission report concluded that one of the biggest failures was the lack of communication between government agencies and law enforcement at all levels. As the former mayor of the municipality who lost the most people per capita on 9/11, those failures destroyed 37 families forever. A 4071 is anti-law enforcement, anti-public safety, and contrary to the strict enforcement of our laws, which should be paramount for our government. This bill ties the hands of law enforcement and prohibits communication between local, county, state, and federal branches. This is also another legislative attempt to further entrench the costly status of New Jersey as a sanctuary state, costing taxpayers millions of dollars and jeopardizing the safety of every resident. I respectfully ask my colleagues to vote no on A 4071.
You know, just because you're a minority doesn't mean you get to speak for all minorities, right? I mean, you look down in Texas and you look at Starr County, 97% Hispanic, Webb County, 95% Hispanic.
Assemblyman, perhaps.
I'm saying all that, Mr.
You're
Speaker,
not. You're talking about statistics from Texas. Come
those counties all voted
on.
to
Stay
have
on
a
the.
secure
Where is
border.
that reflected in the bill? Tell me where that's at in the
Those
bill.
counties all voted
Where is it at in the
to
bill?
be against illegal immigration, Mr. Speaker.
What has
and
that
here
got to
we
do
have
with this
a
bill?
piece of legislation that is called the Immigrant Trust Directive.
So tell me what's
It should be
about
called the Illegal Immigration Trust Directive, Mr. Speaker, and that's the problem, right? The left is only speaking about illegal immigrant
Look, I know you
trust.
want to make a political speech. I do. And I respect that. But I would love you to tell me what's wrong with the bill.
Mr. Speaker,
Speak
let me-
within the four
please,
corners
I'm so
of the
glad
bill.
you said that, Mr. Speaker. I'm so glad you said that because a political speech would be making a piece of legislation up that is just for protecting illegal immigrants and pandering to a specific community and then jamming that through even though it causes chaos in all of our streets. But I'll talk about that when we get to the facial identity bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
The whole idea here is that we're not talking about people who legally migrated to our country. We're not talking about U.S. citizens. We're talking about people who knowingly, willfully, and with forethought came into our country illegally and are now here. They're now here at a cost of over $7 billion a year just here in New Jersey. As our schools struggle, as kids' sports are being eliminated in high schools, as our schools have huge deficits because of people who came into our country illegally, which is a crime.
The entire reason for this bill is to make communities more safe. And I'm not speaking just about the immigrant communities that live in these communities, but we're speaking about all the communities. It's not just the immigrants, and it's about law enforcement. It's making sure the schools feel safe with the people that come in. This is the entire reason for this bill. So when we see, and again, the rhetoric that we have, that we keep hearing about immigrants being undocumented, criminals. This is the entire reason why we are having this discussion, because it's becoming so incredibly divisive and hateful at this point that this is the reason why we're having those kinds of conversations. People, I mean, I don't know if any of you, but we hear, I know that my colleagues and I hear, there's not 1 week that goes by that I don't hear from a community member that emails me, text messages me, that someone was picked up, it was detained, we don't know where they are. And it's not just about the immigrants, but it's also the community that serves them. So this bill is about protecting communities. It is about the entire community, not just the immigrants. So I do urge everyone to vote yes on this bill, because it is not just about the immigrant communities, it's about all of us. Thank you.
You know what, let's get back to the real crux of this bill, and it's about our law enforcement. You know, over the years, to get back to what I was saying, over the years that I've been in the Assembly, we have talked about making sure our law enforcement is able to go into the community safely, is able to build, and our expectation is to able to build relationships with our communities. It's not about ICE. And by the way, ICE doesn't even tell our law enforcement when they're in a town. So how are we supposed to work with them? How are we supposed to protect our residents? How do we know who they're going up to? Because they do not communicate with our law enforcement. So let's not forget about the safety of our law enforcement, that when they are responding to calls at somebody's house, or they are making that routine stop, that they're able to do it without fear themselves of being in some type of confrontation. And ICE, unfortunately, because of lack of communication, they too have no rules or no regulations that guide them. They will just pick up people no matter what they look like, who they are, and where they live. And let's make no mistake about it. So, Mr. Speaker, I understand everybody has a lot of feelings about this, but this bill is about assuring that our law enforcement is able, one, to even work with ICE, but particularly work with our communities to keep them safe, and when there is a problem, building their trust that they are able to do that job.
Which was intended to protect law enforcement from having their addresses published. And the real intent of this bill is to have third parties publish law enforcement's home addresses. Something which we thought was important to protect before. Now we're going to do it because the law enforcement that we're really after, we don't like, because they're enforcing the law, and we don't like the law that they're enforcing. So we're going to allow them to get doxxed, have their addresses printed somewhere on the internet, because we don't like them. And so for good measure, we threw in local law enforcement, the same people that Daniel's bill was all about to protect. This is the lunacy of the opposing party, that they are just out for power, and they can't help themselves. They just can't help themselves.
Back on the
and
bill,
do bills
Assemblyman.
like this where
Assemblyman,
they know
let's
it's
get back on
wrong
the
because they
bill.
passed Daniel's law,
Assemblyman,
and
please
now they're
get back
doing
on
it
the
again.
bill.
This is not something new. This is not some new democratic ideal that we thought of, that law enforcement officers should not cover their faces. In fact, in 2016, Assemblyman Eric Peterson, together with Assemblyman David Reibel, who is no longer in the Assembly, co-sponsored by the leader of the minority party, Assemblyman DeMayo, introduced the bill 3660 and have reintroduced that bill the following session and have reintroduced the bill the following session. For 10 years, we've been hearing calls from the Republican Party to require law enforcement officers to present identification while on duty. Why? And I will read from their words. It is the sponsor's belief that the provisions of the bill requiring law enforcement officers to present identification are necessary to maintain the safety and integrity of routine law enforcement interactions. There is no difference between the bill before us today, S3114, and the bill that my colleagues in the minority party have been pushing for over a decade, except for one. This bill, of course, has the common sense exceptions. It does not interfere with undercover operations. It does not apply in situations where an officer's safety is at risk. And it explicitly allows for masks in medical situations, emergencies, and hazardous conditions. What this bill does is it no longer discriminates between a local, county, state, and federal agents. If we believe, which is common sense policy, that law enforcement individuals should not walk around our streets with masks and being hidden, then the same thing applies whether you're a local officer or you're a federal agent.
Guess not.
Republicans also attempted to amend the legislation, including a proposal that would have required notifications to immigration authorities when undocumented individuals convicted of violent crimes were being released. That amendment was ultimately tabled along party lines. Following the vote, we spoke with several Democratic lawmakers who supported the bills.
You know, this directive has been the policy of the state, but it's important to send a message to our immigrant neighbors and communities throughout New Jersey that this should not just be a policy, but it should be the law of the land. So what we've done today is taken what is the Attorney General's policy and made sure that we send a clear message that in New Jersey, you are protected, you are welcome, and we're not going to invest state resources to enforce federal civil immigration law.
What do you say to people who still have concerns about, people who are coming into this country, they aren't doing it the right way, and that they're saying that, this legislation is not helpful, that people are still able to come in, and what do you have to say to the critics?
I think it's important that we have clear lines of delineation. State law is enforced by state law enforcement agencies, and that doesn't stop or impede federal law enforcement from enforcing federal civil immigration law. And that's good. And if anyone is here who is undocumented, who's not complying with the law, that should run its normal course within the federal system. But we should conflate state enforcement and federal enforcement. Those are two distinct things, and when you do that, you actually start to lose trust amongst immigrant communities who are afraid to go to the local police, who are afraid to report crimes, who are afraid to be witnesses in court. So it's important to make sure that those two lanes are clear. So my message to those communities is that we still want to enforce federal civil immigration law, but that's the job of the federal government, not New Jersey.
One of the other points that the Republicans are talking about when it comes to face coverings for those federal officials, that it's not constitutional because how could state law tell federal agents what to do? Are you able to address that?
Sure. A court in California has already ruled on this very issue and said that as long as the policy applies equally to local, county, state, and federal enforcement agents, it's legally sound. So all we're saying is that just like state law enforcement, federal law enforcement also should make sure that they identify themselves as law enforcement. We've seen a lot of copycat instances where people say that they're federal law enforcement and they're actually just regular criminals, and they actually violate people's rights. So we want to make sure that we keep people safe, and that's why we passed that bill.
We're speaking about the Immigrant Trust Act package, basically. And the reason why that is becoming an issue is because we have seen, especially in the last few years, how incredibly divisive and mean and spirited this conversation is about immigrants. So it's not just about not respecting the law, which we know at the federal level is not being respected. So we know that, one, at the federal level. At the local level, at the state level, New Jersey has always said that they were going to protect, that we are committed to protect immigrants in all of our communities. These package of bills aims to do exactly that. And the reason why we are actually doing more, why I'm so passionate, is because the conversation has become incredibly divisive and just mean-spirited. And calling all immigrants criminals, saying it from the floor, is just incredibly disrespectful, not just for the community itself, but we legislators. Some of us are immigrants, some of us are Latinos, and we are not criminals. And that's really, like us, there's so many other people who are immigrants and don't deserve those kinds of labels.
What do you have to say to people who are watching who might say, well, what about people who are here legally, and there are so many people who are coming to this country illegally, immigrant or not, people who are here legally might be victims of crime. This is, again, is what the other side is talking a lot about. And we are just trying to protect our children. We're trying to protect people who are here. What do you have to say to people who are coming from that side of the argument?
So I understand, and of course, and I think another member mentioned, like none of us in the legislature are supporting criminal activities, whether you are undocumented or undocumented. Of course we are not. But again, federal government, the federal legislation has procedures as to how to handle those kinds of cases and those individuals, and there are procedures that are being violated at the federal level. So no, I just want to reiterate that none of us who voted yes on this bill is advocating for supporting criminals, whether you're undocumented or not. That's not what we want to do.
Just days after the package of immigration bills passed through the legislature, Governor Mikey Sherrill signed all three, including the one that bans law enforcement officers, including federal ICE agents, from wearing masks while interacting with the public.
New Jersey law enforcement should enforce New Jersey laws. We shouldn't use New Jersey resources to do federal agents' jobs. At the same time, we're not going to allow masked federal agents to terrorize our state. We've all seen them in videos, unknown, unnamed, unaccountable, chasing after citizens. Again, not here. I can't believe we have to say this, but in the United States of America, we're not going to tolerate masked roving militias pretending to be well-trained law enforcement agents. I said so in my campaign for governor, and I'll say it again now. So I'm proud to sign today's third and final bill known as the Mask Bill. It bans any law enforcement officer from hiding their faces, and it requires them to clearly identify themselves before making an arrest.
The Department of Homeland Security called the ban despicable and unconstitutional. A spokesperson vowed the federal government will not comply, citing the Supremacy Clause and a sharp rise in assaults and death threats against ICE officers. And that'll do it for today. I'm Laura Jones. Thanks so much for watching New Jersey Politics. We look forward to seeing you back here next time.